Greetings, fellow humans. Katrina here. Happy New Year. Quick disclaimer, I am a professional, not your professional. Nothing I'm about to say should be taken as medical, legal, or otherwise advice. This podcast is purely for education and amusement. That is it. Disclaimer over. So today I thought I'd tell you a brief overview of this book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'll define what a habit is according to that guy who wrote that book, and then I'll explain what effectiveness is from a dialectical perspective. And if you're still around after all that, I'll dive into the news from a century ago. Here we go. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was written by Stephen R. Covey, and that's Stephen with a PH. And this can all be found in the table of contents, so I'm really not giving anything away. His 7 steps are be proactive, that's number 1. Number 2, begin with the end in mind. Number 3, put first things first. Number 4 is think win-win, and he goes into great detail on all of these in the book. Number 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. 6 is synergize. He's got a lot of information on that one. And 7 is sharpen the saw, which is a metaphor at the end. But I want to go back to one that was number 2, beginning with the end in mind. I really like that aspect of the book because he actually has you, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, write your own eulogy, basically thinking about what you would want people to say at your funeral, those values and things of that nature, and then find a way to live like that today. And that's kind of interesting, in my opinion, beginning with the end that far in the end in mind. I usually begin with the end of a project in mind, but looking at the end of life is a different horse of a different color. So defining a habit can go a number of different ways. But if we're looking at Stephen Covey's definition, he defines a habit as, quote, the intersection of knowledge, skill, and desire. So he actually goes on to say that knowledge is a theoretical paradigm, the what to do, and the why. Skill is the how to do, and desire is the motivation or the want to do. In order to make something a habit in our lives, we have to have all 3. And that's part of what he says in the very beginning of the book. If you want to read what he actually talks about in each one of those 7 habits, feel free to get the book. I think it's on Amazon, no affiliation whatsoever. It's just something that I read and liked. So now I'll tell you what effectiveness is in terms of being a mindfulness skill. So it's a mindfulness how skill that can be found in Marsha Linehan's DBT Skills Training and Handouts Worksheet, 2nd edition. And what it entails is being mindful of your goals in a situation, do what is necessary to achieve those goals, focus on what works, so don't let emotion mind get in the way of being effective. Also play by the rules, act as skillfully as you can, that is, do what is needed for the situation that you are in, not the situation that you wish you were in, not the one that would be fair, and not the one that is more comfortable. And finally, let go of willfulness and sitting on one's hands. So that's the effectiveness how skill. Today I told you what the 7 habits are, but you have to read his book to figure out how to do them. I told you how habit is defined in Stephen Covey's world and what effectiveness as a mindfulness skill looks like. So it's time for the news. And that doesn't matter too much. Historical news, that is. I figure stuff from 100 years ago is about as interesting, if not more interesting, than our current news. So January 7th, 1922 was a Saturday. These are the headlines from the Washington Herald. On page 1, Allies agree to ask Soviet to new parley. Russians must recognize debts. So basically, they wanted Russia to recognize their debts and stop with the propaganda. Those are the 2 big things. On page 2, there's an advertisement that says, good, honest shoes for men, $5. And it has a cute little picture of a man, but he is smoking in a store as he shops for shoes. Times have most certainly changed, folks. Moving on to page 6, it actually says this, poison dust used in fight on mosquitoes. Public health experts find larvae eat Paris green. So I looked that up, and they were basically trying to kill the mosquitoes with this poison, which is actually very poisonous to humans as well. Paris green is apparently very toxic and bad for you, but they didn't know that in 1922. Moving on to page 10, I skipped a few pages, they were boring. There's this advertisement that says eggs, 45 cents a dozen, coffee, 10 cents a pound, all at Quality Grocery Company. I noticed that the advertisements are significant price differences, what with the cost of living differences, inflation, the times changing, all of that. It is no longer 45 cents for a dozen eggs. I just thought that was cool. Also on page 10, there's a disturbing section where birth and death announcements are separated between whites and other. Yikes, it really was a different world a century ago. On page 11, headline reads, maximum fines compelling rise in liquor prices. Judge punishes woman violator at rate of $100 a half pint. So I had to Google this, and according to Google, prohibition began January 17th of 1920. So at the time of this newspaper, it was about 2 years into everyone having to sneak around with moonshine and other homemade booze. Also on page 11, 3 complain rent charges are excessive. And I thought this was hilarious because $200 is what they were saying was unreasonable. But comparatively, that does sound unreasonable. The going rate, according to one Mrs. Virginia Corbin, was $37 monthly for her 2 rooms. So that is a pretty big jump back then. Nowadays, if you could get anything for $200, well, I just don't think that's something that you could do in this day and age. Page 14 has some help wanted ads, and they're actually separated. Wow, the separation is a lot. They're separated between males and females. I don't think they do that anymore. We've come a long way in print, at least. Page 18 has the comic strip, and it's called The Gumps. Leave it to Andy, just wait. And I won't read it to you because it's not really funny and maybe a little bit sexist. Anyway, that page also has a section on cosmetic surgery. And I have to read this quote because it is just hilarious to me, the shaming. It really says this, no lie, quote, no woman was ever made happier by wrinkles. None was ever made to feel younger by them. And more serious than that, loss of position is threatened and loss of the spirit of youth, without which no woman is successful. No matter her vocation, be it stage or movie star, businesswoman or professional, or wife. Talk about body shaming. Geez, folks, I'm proud of my wrinkles and the few grays that I have coming in. On a happier note, also on the final page is an advertisement for the sale of ostrich feather fans. I kind of wish this product was still around just because the feather fans look so cool. Maybe I'll check it out and see if there's an Amazon something equivalent. So its prices are actually just $3.95 and $5.95. I'm sure if they're still around, the prices are much higher than that. It reads, beautiful high quality fans at extremely low prices, just right for the social season and for gifts. All right. I hope you enjoyed this extended edition of my podcast where I talk for just a few minutes more than I normally would. And I talk a little bit about everything and things that I don't know about. I don't know about the news from 100 years ago, and yet I talked a little bit about it anyway. So I'll continue to do that, talking about things that I don't know a whole lot about and showing up every week. And I do appreciate everyone who downloads. If you want to support the show in a different way, you can click the button on the website. If you like this episode, tell your friends to have a listen. And I really do appreciate each and every one of you simply for existing.